Lila, where is your $5 million trust fund? Preston's voice tore through the quiet Fenwick Island living room, ragged and disbelieving, the words hanging heavy in the salt-scented air like a storm about to break. Kendall's champagne flute slipped from her hand and shattered against the wide plank oak floor, sharp, sudden, final. Glass scattered everywhere as her face went ghost white, eyes wide with pure terror. Lila turned to her father first, heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe, tears already brimming. What 5 million, Dad? The word, Dad, came out small, fragile, like she was afraid saying it would make him disappear again. Her voice cracked on the last syllable. You sent money? For me? Preston's anger faltered. His eyes filled as he stared at her. His daughter, standing there in faded clothes, looking at him like he was both a miracle and a ghost. Kendall took one stumbling step back, hands raised, voice shaking. Sir. I can explain, she stammered, the words tumbling out too fast, too desperate. It's not what you think. Please, just let me. Preston didn't even look at her. His gaze stayed locked on Lila, soft and broken. Every quarter, he whispered, voice thick with tears. 14 years. $5 million. All for you, baby. Only ever for you. Lila's tears fell faster, her chest hitching. She told me you never sent anything. She told me you blamed me for Mom, that you couldn't even look at me because I took her away. A broken sound escaped Preston, half sob, half growl. He reached out, slow, like she might disappear if he moved too fast. You never forgot me? She breathed, tears streaming now. You never blamed me for Mom? Preston crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world, because she was. Never, he said against her hair, voice breaking completely. Not once. You're my little girl. You've always been my little girl. Kendall stood frozen, hands still half raised, mouth open but no more words coming. The room was silent except for Lila's quiet sobs and Preston's whispered, I've got you now. In the room was just a father holding his daughter for the first time in 14 years. And a guardian who knew, in that moment, everything she'd built on lies was finally crumbling. And the truth? Was already screaming. Before we continue, I want to speak to you for a moment. If stories like this remind you that kindness still exists, if they make you feel something real in a world that's getting louder and colder, then I'd love to have you here with us. This channel isn't just videos, it's a tiny corner of the internet where good people come together. Where we believe in second chances, in hope, and in humanity. And right now you're early. You're part of the very first people building this family with me. So if you want to grow with us, if you want more stories that touch your heart, go ahead and subscribe. It's free, it supports the channel more than you know. And it tells me that there are still people out there who believe in kindness just as much as I do. If you have subscribed to this channel, I can officially say welcome to the family. Preston Delaney sat alone in his glass-walled office atop Delaney Tower in Newark, Delaware, staring out at the winter sky over White Clay Creek. The view was stunning, acres of preserved land his company had helped protect, solar fields glinting in the weak December sun, but it never filled the silence in the room. At 53 he was one of the most powerful men in renewable energy, a pioneer who'd taken a garage idea and turned it into a multi-billion-dollar empire. Yet every night he came home to an empty estate, the kind of quiet that pressed in on a man until he could barely breathe. 14 years ago, Harper had been taken from him. His brilliant, laughing wife, the biochemist who dreamed up half their breakthroughs, had collapsed during a family hike at Cape Henlopen State Park. A sudden, devastating flare-up of her rare autoimmune disease. She'd shielded 2-year-old Lila with her last strength, whispering to Preston to keep their daughter safe. Doctors said it was just bad luck, the cruel timing of an illness they'd been managing for years. He'd believed them. He'd had to. In the weeks after the funeral, Preston had been a ghost himself, drowning in grief, unable to care for a toddler while running a company on the edge of collapse. That's when Kendall stepped in. Harper's college roommate from UD, the woman Harper had chosen as Lila's godmother, showed up with tears and a plan. Let me raise her, Press, she'd said. I'll give her a real home in Fenwick with my stepkids. You focus on building the future you and Harper dreamed of. I'll handle the day-to-day. She'd made it sound so simple, so right. The lawyers drew up the trust, $30,000 every quarter, growing into millions for Lila's education, her health, her life. Preston kept visitation rights, But Kendall gently convinced him distance was kinder while Lila was young. She needs stability, she'd said. Not reminders of what she lost. He'd agreed. God, he'd agreed. For years the updates came like clockwork. Photos of Lila at the beach, report cards from virtual school, messages about how happy she was. Preston sent the money and buried himself deeper in work, telling himself it was enough. Until that morning. His private investigator, Riley Kane, a former Coast Guard officer who didn't waste words, had called him up to the office without explanation. Now Riley slid a thin folder across the desk. "You're not gonna like this, Mr. Delaney?" The first photo stole his breath. A teenage girl with Harper's hazel eyes and curly chestnut hair, standing in line at a food pantry. The next showed her asleep on a cot in a crowded shelter. The last one, she was stacking boxes in a warehouse, sleeves rolled high, looking exhausted but determined. It was Lila. Is Lila. Riley's voice had been quiet. "She's been there 5 months, Mr. Delaney. Before that, a duplex in Milford. Kendall's living large in Fenwick. The money, it never reached the girl." Preston didn't remember standing up. He didn't remember grabbing his keys or telling his assistant to cancel everything. He only remembered the drive south on Route 13, hands gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles went white, the world blurring past Amish farms and strip malls. Preston hadn't called ahead. He hadn't warned anyone. Something raw and urgent told him to just go. He drove south on Route 13, past bare fields and quiet towns, until he reached the familiar waterfront street in Fenwick Island. Kendall's bayfront home, the one his money had helped buy, gleamed under the winter sun. Kendall answered the door herself, surprise flashing across her face when she saw him. "Press? What are you doing here? You should have called." "Where's Lila?" he cut in, voice flat. Kendall blinked, smile faltering. "She's out running an errand." "What? Is everything okay?" Preston stepped past her into the sunlit living room, the Atlantic glittering beyond the windows. The place smelled of expensive candles and salt water. Everything screamed money, money he'd sent. Then he heard footsteps on the stairs. Lila appeared at the landing carrying a laundry basket, wearing faded jeans and an old hoodie. She froze when she saw him, eyes wide, Harper's eyes. Kendall's face went pale. Preston's heart stopped. "Lila," he said, voice cracking on her name. She set the basket down slowly, confusion and something deeper flickering across her face. "You're him. From the pictures." Kendall took a hesitant step forward. Let me explain." He ignored her, eyes locked on his daughter. He pulled the folded bank summary from his coat, the one Riley had printed that morning, and held it out. "Lila," he said again, softer this time, the words scraping his throat raw. "Where is your $5 million trust fund?" The room went dead silent. Lila turned to him first, tears already gathering, lips trembling. What 5 million, Dad?" The word, Dad, came out small, fragile, like she was testing it for the first time in her life, afraid it might break. Kendall's champagne flute slipped from the side table where she'd set it earlier and shattered against the wide plank oak floor, sharp, sudden, final. Lila's tears spilled over. You sent money? For me?" Preston nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Kendall raised her hands, voice shaking. "Sir, I can explain." But Preston didn't look at her. He only saw Lila, his daughter, standing there in clothes that weren't new, eyes searching his face like she was seeing sunlight after years underground. "Every quarter," he whispered. 14 years. All for you." Lila's knees buckled. A broken sob tore from her as the truth crashed over her. Preston crossed the room and caught her, pulling her into his arms for the first time since she was 2. She clung to him, face buried in his chest, crying like the lost child she'd been forced to become. "I thought you didn't want me," she choked out. "I thought I was alone." "Never," he said, voice breaking, holding her tighter. "You're my little girl." Kendall stood frozen, hands half raised, the shattered glass at her feet reflecting the winter light like broken promises. Later, after Preston had quietly told Kendall they'd talk soon, after he'd loaded Lila's few belongings into his car, after the silent drive north to Newark, Lila sat in the passenger seat clutching her worn notebook of solar sketches. "Those assignments Kendall gave me," she said softly, staring out the window. "The biochemistry problems. Some of the ideas felt so familiar." Like Mom used to talk about them when I was little. Preston's grip tightened on the wheel. Harper's unpublished work, ideas she'd only ever shared at home. He forced a gentle smile. We'll figure everything out, sweetheart. But that night, while Lila slept in a guest room bigger than any she'd known, Preston sat in his study with the preliminary report from his accountant. The trust money hadn't just disappeared into vacations and luxury. A significant portion had looped right back, funneled into anonymous crypto investments that traced to shell accounts linked to Delaney Renewables itself. His own company had unknowingly helped fund the betrayal. Someone had played him masterfully. And tomorrow the real investigation began. The Newark estate felt too big at first, like a museum Lila was afraid to touch. Preston watched her wander the sunlit halls that first evening, fingertips trailing over the smart glass windows that shifted tint with the light, eyes wide at the hydroponic wall blooming with fresh herbs in the kitchen. Everything was Harper's design influence. Clean lines, sustainable materials, warmth hidden in the tech. Lila stopped in front of a framed photo on the mantel. Preston and Harper laughing on a wind farm in Sussex County, Lila as a toddler on Harper's hip. She was beautiful, Lila whispered. Preston's throat tightened. She would have been so proud of you. They sat up late that night in the living room, fire crackling in the eco-fireplace, a blanket draped over Lila's shoulders. She told him about Milford, the duplex with the leaky roof, the virtual school, that was mostly chores and isolation. Kendall said friends would distract me from my studies, she said quietly. I didn't realize how alone I was until I had to survive without her. Preston listened, guilt carving deeper with every word. He told her about Harper, the way she'd light up explaining solar cell efficiency, how she'd dance barefoot in the kitchen to old Springsteen, how she'd planned an entire future for their daughter before the disease stole her away. Lila soaked it in like someone dying of thirst, asking question after question until her eyes finally drooped. The next morning, while Lila slept off years of exhaustion, Preston met with his team in the study. Forensic accountant Nora Patel, a sharp, no-nonsense woman from Georgetown, spread documents across the oak table. Private investigator Riley Kane leaned against the wall, arms crossed. It's worse than we thought, Nora said, tapping a stack of printouts. The trust money didn't just pay for vacations and private schools for Kendall's stepkids. She set up fake innovation grants in Lila's name, supposedly for advanced STEM projects. But none of the funds ever reached educational programs. Instead, they routed through anonymous wallets into dark web crypto trades. Preston's jaw clenched. How much? Over $2 million in the last 5 years alone. Riley slid a tablet across. And she's been careful. Used Tor layered wallets. But she got sloppy with one early transfer, left a breadcrumb tied to an old email account. Lila appeared in the doorway then, hair messy from sleep, wearing one of Preston's old UD hoodies that swallowed her frame. I might be able to help with that, she said softly. Everyone turned. She held her worn notebook, the one she'd carried from the shelter. Kendall made me do these crypto puzzles for school credit. Said it was financial literacy. I got good at tracing patterns. Preston's heart twisted. His daughter, self-taught in the dark. Nora raised an eyebrow but handed over the tablet. Lila sat, fingers flying across the screen, brow furrowed in concentration. 10 minutes later she looked up, eyes wide. This wallet links to an old patent application, she said. Filed 3 years ago. Solar storage optimization. Mom's exact design from the stories you told me last night. The one she sketched on napkins. Nora pulled up the patent record. The inventor listed, Kendall Marie Voss. Preston felt the room tilt. Harper had never filed those designs, said they were years from ready, that she wanted them perfect before sharing with the world. They'd only existed in her private journals, and in the stories she told Lila when she was little. Kendall had stolen them, turned Harper's legacy into profit, and used Lila's own sketches, ideas passed down subconsciously from bedtime stories, to perfect the application. Riley's phone buzzed. He stepped out to take the call, came back minutes later looking grim. There's more, he said. I had a contact pull Harper's full medical records from the hospital in Lewis. The batch of immunosuppressants she was given the week before the flare-up? Traced back to an unregulated online supplier. Same dark web marketplace Kendall's been using for her crypto trades. Preston went very still. Nora met his eyes. The dosage in Harper's system was contaminated, enough to trigger a fatal reaction in someone with her condition. The official report called it a tragic coincidence. But if Kendall supplied those drugs... Lila's hand flew to her mouth. She killed Mom? Preston pulled her close as she started to shake. We don't know for sure yet, he said, voice rough. But we're going to find out. That afternoon he made the call. Kendall picked up on the second ring, her voice bright and practiced. Press. How lovely to hear from you. Everything okay with the surprise visit yesterday? Lila settled back in. Preston gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. We need to talk. In person. Tomorrow. A pause just a beat too long. Of course, she said smoothly. Come by the house. We'll clear the air. He hung up without another word. That night, as snow began to fall softly over the estate, Preston stood at the window watching Lila asleep on the couch, notebook open to a fresh page where she'd sketched a new panel design. Something innovative, something uniquely hers. Tomorrow they would drive to Fenwick. Tomorrow the whispers would become shouts. And whatever Kendall thought she'd buried all those years ago, was about to come crashing into the light. The drive south to Fenwick Island felt shorter than it ever had, the winter sky low and gray over the coastal highway. Preston kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting near Lila's on the center console. She hadn't let go since they left Newark. Riley Kane followed in a separate car with Nora Patel and Marcus Hale, the attorney Preston had brought on to make sure everything stayed airtight. They pulled up to Kendall's bayfront villa just after noon. The house looked even more ostentatious in daylight, floor-to-ceiling glass, sleek decks overlooking the Assawoman Bay, a gleaming electric SUV in the driveway that Preston's own money had undoubtedly paid for. Kendall opened the door herself, smile faltering the moment she saw the group behind Preston and Lila. Press. I wasn't expecting everyone, she said, voice thin. Come in, I guess. They filed into the sun-drenched living room, the same wide plank oak floor that had held shattered glass just days ago now spotless. Kendall's stepkids, Ethan, 17, and Ava, 15, peeked down from the upstairs railing, curious and confused. Preston didn't sit. None of them did. Marcus Hale set a thick folder on the coffee table with deliberate care. Riley stood by the door like a silent sentinel. Nora opened her laptop, screen angled toward Kendall. We're not here for coffee, Kendall, Preston said quietly. We're here for the truth. Kendall's eyes darted to Lila, then back to Preston. I don't know what you think. $5 million, Preston cut in. 14 years of transfers. Fake innovation grants. Patents filed in your name using Harper's unpublished designs. Dark web crypto wallets. Contaminated medication traced to the same supplier you used the week Harper died. Kendall's face went ashen. She sank onto the edge of the couch, hands trembling in her lap. Lila stepped forward, voice steady despite the tears threatening. You told me my mom's death was just bad luck. You told me Dad didn't want me. You used my drawings, ideas I didn't even know came from her, and sold them as yours. Kendall opened her mouth, closed it. I can explain. Then explain, Preston said, voice like steel. Explain how you watched my daughter starve while you lived like this. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Finally, Kendall's shoulders slumped. It started small, she whispered. A little here and there for the kids' schools, vacations, then the patents. Harper always had the best ideas. After she was gone, they were just sitting there. I thought, why should they go to waste? Lila's breath hitched. And Mom's medicine? Kendall looked away toward the bay. I was selling some supplements online. Nothing big. One batch got mixed up. I never thought it would. Her voice cracked. It was an accident. Preston's fists clenched. An accident that conveniently removed the one person standing between you and everything we built. Marcus Hale stepped forward. Kendall Marie Voss, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and suspicion of manslaughter. Officers are outside. Kendall's head snapped up. What? No, you can't. The front door opened. 2 Fenwick Island PD officers entered, calm and professional. Kendall's stepkids rushed downstairs, eyes wide with panic. Mom? Ava cried. What's happening? Kendall reached for them as the officers cuffed her, tears streaming now. It's okay, babies. Call Uncle Ray, he'll know what to do. Preston turned to the teens. Ethan looked furious, Ava terrified. He softened his voice. You're not alone in this. I've already spoken to your uncle in Milton. He's on his way. You'll stay with family. Ethan glared at him. You're destroying our lives. Preston met his gaze. Your mother did that. Not me. As Kendall was let out, Lila stood frozen, watching the only family she'd known for 14 years disappear in handcuffs. Back at the estate that night, the house felt quieter than ever. Preston poured Lila a mug of hot chocolate, Harper's old recipe, and they sat in the study surrounded by boxes of Harper's things he'd never been able to unpack. Lila pulled out an old leather-bound lab journal from one of the boxes, the cover worn soft. I found this in the attic earlier, she said. It was Mom's. Preston's heart clenched. He hadn't touched it since the funeral. Lila flipped through carefully, stopping on a page near the end. Harper's neat handwriting filled the margins. Notes on solar storage, sketches of panels, and then something else. A pressed flower from Cape Henlopen. A small ultrasound photo taped to the page. And a single line. If anything happens to me, make sure Lila knows about her little brother or sister. Dr. Ellis says it's a boy. Kendall promised to help tell her one day. Lila's fingers traced the ultrasound. Mom was pregnant? Preston stared, the room spinning. Lila turned the page. Another note, dated a week before the hike. Talked to Kendall about the baby. She's excited to be auntie again. Told her about my affair with Marcus, stupid, brief, over. She swore she'd never tell. Baby's still Preston's in every way that matters. We'll make it work. Lila looked up, eyes wide. Marcus, your attorney? Marcus Hale? Preston couldn't speak. They called Marcus immediately. He arrived within the hour, face pale. Harper had confided in Kendall about a short affair with Marcus Hale during a rough patch early in the marriage. The baby Harper carried when she died, Lila's younger sibling, had been Marcus's biologically. But Kendall, in her jealousy, had buried the truth. And one of her stepchildren, Ethan, was actually that child, adopted quietly by Kendall's late husband years ago to hide the scandal. Ethan wasn't just Kendall's stepson. He was Lila's half-brother. Blood. Lila sat back, journal clutched to her chest, tears falling silently. All this time, she'd had a brother living under the same roof that starved her. And the woman who'd raised them both had hidden it all. The betrayal wasn't just financial anymore. It was family. Deep, twisted, and unbreakable. Court was only the beginning. The Chancery Court in Newark hummed with quiet tension, the kind that only comes when money, family, and murder collide in the first state. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the lobby buzzed with reporters from Wilmington to Rehoboth, Delaware's biggest trial in years. Preston sat in the front row, hand resting on Lila's knee as she waited to be called. She wore a simple navy blazer and skirt, her first new outfit, bought just for this, and clutched the worn notebook like a talisman. Kendall sat at the defense table, thinner than before, hair pulled back severely, eyes darting every time the doors opened. She hadn't looked at Lila once. The prosecution laid it out methodically. Nora Patel on the stand for hours, walking the jury through the financial trail, fake innovation grants, diverted trust payments, luxury purchases, dark web crypto wallets. Bank records projected on the screen showed millions flowing out of Lila's trust and straight into Kendall's accounts. Then came the forensics expert from the state lab. He detailed the contaminated immunosuppressants, traced to a batch sold on the same dark web marketplace Kendall had used for years. The concentration of impurities was consistent with deliberate adulteration, he said calmly. Enough to trigger a fatal cascade in a patient with Mrs. Delaney's condition. Kendall's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Witness after witness took the stand. The Milford duplex landlord who remembered a quiet girl rarely allowed outside. The Fenwick neighbors who saw Kendall's stepkids in new clothes while Lila wore hand-me-downs. Even a former dark web associate who'd turned state's evidence, confirming Kendall's handle and sales history. Then it was Lila's turn. She walked to the stand with steady steps, though Preston saw her hands tremble as she was sworn in. The courtroom fell silent. Miss Delaney, the prosecutor began gently, can you tell us about your life under Ms. Voss's care? Lila's voice started small but grew stronger with every sentence. She spoke of the isolation, the virtual school, that was mostly chores, the locked doors, the lies about her father. She described turning 16 and being told to leave with nothing but a backpack and a single photo of her mother. She talked about sleeping in parks before finding the shelter, about going to bed hungry while Kendall's family vacationed. And then she looked straight at Kendall. "You told me my dad didn't want me," she said, voice cracking but clear. "You told me my mom's death was my fault for stressing her. You used my drawings, ideas I didn't even know came from her, and sold them as yours. You took everything from me. My childhood. My family. My future." Kendall finally met her eyes. For a moment, something flickered there, guilt, maybe regret, but it vanished behind a mask of defiance. The jury was crying. Preston was crying. Kendall took the stand in her own defense, voice trembling as she painted herself as a loving guardian overwhelmed by responsibility. "I made mistakes," she admitted. "I used some of the money, yes, but never to hurt Harper. That batch, it was a terrible accident. I loved her. She was my best friend." The prosecutor played the final card. Emails from years ago recovered from an old hard drive. Kendall ranting to a friend about Harper's perfect life, her jealousy over the marriage, the company, the talent. One message sent months before the fatal hike. "Sometimes I wish she'd just disappear." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Embezzlement, fraud, wire fraud, manslaughter. The judge's sentence was swift, 20 years in prison, full restitution of the original $5 million plus interest and damages. Kendall's assets, the Fenwick house, the cars, the accounts, were seized immediately. She was led away in cuffs without looking back. Outside the courthouse, snow had started to fall, soft, quiet flakes that felt like a cleansing. Preston pulled Lila into a hug on the steps, cameras flashing around them. "It's over," he whispered. But it wasn't. Not quite. That night, back at the estate, Lila sat cross-legged on the study floor surrounded by Nora's leftover files and her laptop. She'd been quiet all evening, processing. "I keep thinking about that one wallet," she said suddenly. "The rebound one Nora said Kendall emptied before the arrest." Preston frowned. Law enforcement seized it. Nothing left. Lila shook her head, fingers already flying across the keys. She was too careful. There's always a backup layer. She worked in silence for an hour, tracing old transactions, following patterns she'd learned from Kendall's twisted lessons. Preston watched, heart swelling with pride and ache. Then Lila gasped. "There," she breathed. "A hidden rebound address. Timed release, set to unlock if the main wallet was compromised." She thought no one would notice. The screen showed a balance, $3 million. Recovered. Intact. Nora confirmed it the next morning. Funds routed through layered crypto tumblers, but Lila had unraveled every step. The judge ordered the additional millions added to Lila's new ironclad trust, properly protected this time with Preston and a court-appointed overseer. Reporters called her a hero. Billionaire's daughter cracks mother's killer's secret fortune. Lila just smiled when Preston showed her the headlines. "I didn't do it for the money," she said quietly. "I did it so she couldn't win. Not even from prison." Spring came early that year. Lila enrolled in the University of Delaware's engineering program, early admission, full scholarship from the university president himself, who'd followed the trial. She moved into a dorm but came home most weekends, her sketches now filling new notebooks with ideas that were entirely her own. Ethan, her half-brother, reached out once, through his uncle. A hesitant text. "Can we talk sometime?" Lila stared at it for a long time. "Maybe," she told Preston. "When I'm ready." Justice had currents deeper than anyone expected. And Lila was learning to navigate them, one truth, one discovery, one step at a time. Summer arrived soft and golden over Cape Henlopen, the dunes rolling like waves frozen in time, the Atlantic whispering secrets to the shore. 9 months after the verdict, Preston and Lila stood at the edge of the state park where everything had begun and ended for Harper. The air smelled of salt and pine, and the morning light painted the beach grass in shades of hope. They weren't alone. A small crowd had gathered near the new education pavilion. Shelter directors from across Delaware, reporters from Wilmington and Dover, a handful of bright-eyed high school students clutching acceptance letters. And Ethan, tall, awkward, standing a little apart with his uncle, watching Lila with cautious eyes. The Harper Delaney Spark Fund was launching today. Scholarships for at-risk youth pursuing STEM, full tuition, housing, mentorship. 10 recipients into this first year, all kids who'd known hunger, instability, or loss. Just like Lila. Preston spoke first, voice steady but thick with emotion. He told the story everyone already knew from the headlines: the betrayal, the trial, the justice. Then he stepped aside. Lila took the podium, 16 going on 17, poised in a simple sundress the color of sea glass. She held Harper's leather-bound lab journal, the one that had changed everything. "My mom believed ideas could change the world," she began, voice clear across the dunes. "She believed no one should be left behind because of where they started. Today we're making sure her light keeps shining." She opened the journal to the final pages, the ones they'd discovered only weeks ago, tucked behind a false back cover Harper had cleverly sewn in years earlier. A letter in Harper's handwriting. "If you're reading this, something went wrong. Kendall's jealousy has always been a shadow. I've seen it grow. I've hidden backups of my core research here at Bombay Hook Wildlife Refuge, in the old observation blind by the salt marsh. Coordinates enclosed. Use it wisely. Protect our girl. Tell her every day she's enough. And tell her the baby I carried was still ours. Ours in love, if not always in blood. Harper." Beneath the letter, GPS coordinates, a small key taped to the page, and a flash drive sealed in plastic. Preston and Lila had followed the trail 2 weeks earlier, driving to the refuge at dawn, finding the weathered blind, unlocking a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside, encrypted drives containing Harper's complete unpublished work. Breakthroughs in efficient energy storage, biodegradable battery materials, designs years ahead of their time. Worth tens of millions in patents and licensing. Harper hadn't just suspected betrayal. She'd prepared for it. She'd protected her family from beyond the grave. Lila looked out at the crowd now, tears shining but smile fierce. "Mom left us more than memories. She left us a fortune in ideas, and a mandate to use it for good. The Spark Fund starts with $8 million from those recovered patents. And it will grow. Because innovation isn't just for the lucky. It's for the fighters." The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, Lila walked the dunes alone for a moment, until Ethan approached, hands in his pockets. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey." They stood in silence, watching gulls wheel overhead. "I didn't know," he said finally, "about any of it. Mom, Kendall, she never told us you were struggling. She said you wanted to be independent." Lila nodded, throat tight. "I believe you." Another pause. "You're my sister," he said, voice cracking. "Half anyway. I looked at the records. I wish I'd known sooner." Lila turned to him, eyes soft. "We can start now. Cousins, brothers, whatever feels right. Family isn't always what we're born into. Sometimes it's what we choose." He smiled, small, tentative, real. Later that afternoon, Preston and Lila rented kayaks on the Indian River inlet, paddling side by side through calm waters ringed by marshes. The sun warmed their faces, and for the first time in years, Preston felt something like peace. Lila trailed her fingers in the water. "I filed my first patent last week," she said. "Wind turbine optimization, using some of Mom's storage principles but with my own twist. They accepted it. Under my name." Preston's chest swelled. She'd be screaming from the rooftops. Lila laughed, bright, free, the sound of healing. That night, back at the estate, Preston found Lila on the deck sketching under the stars. Her latest design, a community solar array for shelters, scalable and affordable. "Think we can build it?" she asked. He sat beside her, arm around her shoulders. "We already are." In the end, Kendall had taken 14 years. But she hadn't taken their spirit. Harper's foresight had turned betrayal into legacy, lies into truth, loss into light. And somewhere on the dunes where it all began, the wind carried Harper's laughter across the water, proud, fierce, eternal. Justice wasn't just punishment. It was restoration. It was dawn after the longest night. And for Preston and Lila Delaney, the future wasn't something stolen anymore. It was something they were building, together, stronger, brighter, under Delaware skies that finally felt like home. What will you rate this story from 0 to 10? And what part of the world are you watching from? Comment your country below. Let's build a global community rooted in kindness and second chances. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. Your support brings us closer to our 1K subscriber milestone and inspires us to keep creating more emotional stories of resilience, healing, and Black excellence. Thank you for being part of our journey. Your presence matters more than you know. Hope to see you again.